Halito, chima. Okay. Yeah, it's not often I get dressed in my Choctaw clothing, my traditional clothing. This is the Native American History Month, and we had a powwow just this last weekend. So I figure I'll dive down into my family's culture just a little bit. Um, Most times, traditional Choctaw clothing is reserved for special occasions. A lot of times, weddings. I guess also funerals, weddings, powwows, any large social event. Most of them on a reservation, either Oklahoma, Mississippi, Louisiana, and Alabama. But I figured today I'll tell us an interesting story. This is sort of an origin story. Some call it call it an origin story. Some call it a migration story. I guess it's more of a migration story, honestly. It's a very interesting story, very old story. It has a lot of different variations, and some little details differ depending who tells it. Um, I guess my variation is sort of a mixture of everyone's other variations, um, and some interesting contextual, stuff sort of added into it. But yeah, on the clothing, yeah, it's sort of a French style. We adopted this in early 1800s, late 1700s. Um, the hat we call it chapeau hat. I think we call it a chapeau. I believe that's a mispronunciation of a French word for hat. I think, but that's what we call it, chapeau, in the Choctaw language. I think the shirt. Ilafoka tapa, I think, shirt. We call it shirt. Ilafoka, I think so, yeah. I think so. Anyway, I'll tell a story. What's a story in Choctaw? Shuka numpa. Yeah, shuka. There's like a fable or a story, something like that. I'm not fluent in the language. Chata numpa. Chata numpa is continue lupilili. I speak a little bit, not fluent. Yeah. Yeah. So, Chubakeo. Anyway, this is a migration story. So, a long time ago, my people came from a faraway place to the west. Some say northwest, west, northwest. Far away to the northwest. This is called northwest. Something happened. Again, the story doesn't tell what happened. It was perhaps some kind of a disaster, natural disaster. Um, you know, volcanic eruption, earthquake, flood, tsunami. You pick. Take your pick. But whatever it was, our traditional homeland was no longer livable. And from what I hear from different versions of the story, a lot of people died in whatever happened. So the people were now stuck in a homeland that was no longer inhabitable. So two brothers, they came up. They came up to lead the people. One brother was named Chahta, and the other Chikasha. And these two brothers looked upon a person, I guess, in English, I guess it'll be sort of your traditional medicine man, spiritual leader. We called it Hopai. He was a Hopai. That was like a spiritual leader of medicine man. Call it what you want. Hopai. We'll call him Hopai. And then this is the story. So anyway, the two brothers, Chahta and Chikasha, they looked towards the Hopai to lead the people out of this land to a new place that is fertile and that can sustain the people. So, Hopai, he said, we will leave. And we'll travel west on the first night. Travel east on the first night. And at every camp, he'll get his staff and plant his staff into the ground. And so that night, the people will sleep. And every morning, whatever direction the staff is leaning, that's the direction people will travel. So, Chahta and Chikasha, they're both groups. They're large. No, I've heard they're large groups. I heard some people say they're small groups. Either way, both groups travel together. Both brothers leading each group. So every night, they would set up camp. Every evening, set up camp, and Hopai, he would plant his staff into the ground. And next morning, the staff would be leaning in a certain direction, and the people would get up and head that direction. Now, over the years, again, this is an old story, ancient story. Over the years, a lot of biblical elements have creeped into the story. Some say this journey took 40 days. Some say 40 years. Um, no one knows how long it took. I would imagine it took years. Depending on what you want to call, Northwest Territories. Um, it could have took years, a whole generation. We don't know, but we do know that every evening, Hopai would plant a staff, and every morning, it would lean, and the people would follow Chahta and Chikasha, follow them in that direction. So years passed, and eventually they um, reached this one area one point in their journey, and the sky was cloudy, and the wind was blowing, and rain, and it was a storm brewing. And Hopai plants his staff into the ground. Mosquito, wow. Plants his staff into the ground. Big old mosquito. Gotcha. Yeah, mosquitoes. He planted his staff in the ground as a storm was brewing, as the storm was building. And this is another place where the story sort of diverges a little bit from depending on who tells it. Some say the brothers had a disagreement and they separated. Um, some say as the storm built, the two brothers, Chahta and Chikasha, um, their groups got separated because of the storm, and Chahta's group stayed put, and Hopai planted the staff into the ground, and Chikasha, his group, would accidentally separated themselves, and got lost during the storm. And the storm blew that night, and it rained, and the wind blew, and it was just some chaos. The region that we lived, I imagine what they experienced was probably a tropical storm or a Gulf Coast hurricane. That's what I'm actually thinking it probably was. But anyway, next morning after the storm had pretty much blown through, Chahta and the people got up and came to the Hopai, and the Hopai looked at the staff, and this time the staff was standing straight up. Wasn't leaning, wasn't either one way or another, staying straight up. And that's where Chahta's group settled down and began a new life. And Chahta's group became known as the Choctaw people. Now, Chikasha, his group got separated. His group actually ended up going further east. And to this day, we call them, Chikasha's group, the Chickasaw. And believe it or not, the Chickasaw people and Choctaw people were actually brother tribes or sister tribes, if you want to call it. We're related to the point where even our language is almost identical. There's pronunciation and a little bit of grammatical differences. But other than that, both languages can be spoken back and forth together, and we can understand both languages. So the Choctaw people and the Chickasaw people are basically, this day, are still brother tribe, brother nations. So yeah, that's the migration story, the Choctaw story. I imagine there's probably a Chickasaw story. I don't know it, honestly. If there is one, I don't know it. I'm gonna have to do some little digging for that. But the Choctaw story, I've always thought it was very interesting, just because of the fact that throughout humankind, people did migrate, and often migration often wasn't because they just want to get up and go. Migration was because they were forced to leave, either through warfare or a natural disaster. And just some of the elements of the story of this migration from the west to the east, and then the storm that brewed, that it came up, and odds are it probably was a Gulf Coast tropical storm or a Gulf Coast hurricane, We end up migrating and living in what is now Mississippi, Louisiana, Alabama. Um, After the 1830s, of course, I guess the last treaty was Treaty of Dancing Rabbit Creek, and the Indian, the removals of into Oklahoma, which is was then Indian Territory. Um, some Choctaw decided to stay put. So now we have four main groups in the Choctaw Nation. You have the Oklahoma Choctaws in Oklahoma, the Mississippi Band Choctaws in Mississippi, which is now I guess Philadelphia, Mississippi. You had the Gina Band, which is in Gina, Louisiana, and then you have the Moa, which is a Choctaw group that is actually in Alabama. So yeah, that is the Choctaw migration story, and a little glimpse into my culture and who I am. So hope you enjoyed it. I'll probably make a few more videos. You know, there's some cool mythology. Neat little monster stories, you know, there's Bigfoot, you know, the Jumpy and the little mermaid story with the Okanahulo, you know, some pretty weird stories. The long black being that slithers on the bed like a snake. Yeah, some pretty cool stories that they'll probably creep you out too. I tell them at night. So yeah, I'll make a few more videos later on. I get some time and dive more into the culture and a little bit of history, I guess, of my people, the Choctaw Nation. So, as I say, Yokoke, Hachipisa Lachiki. Hiya, hiya, hiyo, hiya, hiya, hiyo.